Thank you so much. Hope everyone can hear me. You can start that timer again. Um, my name's Greg Palast, and I'm an investigative reporter. You can tell by my hat. And if it has, you'll see actually a little dent in it. That's where Ms. Badpenny had actually poked a hole. I really did have a hidden camera in my hat for a recent jump we did on one of the billionaires who will be choosing your president for you. And what I'd like to do is I'm a reporter. I've been a reporter for BBC Television and the Guardian newspapers. Even though I like BBC, Downton Abbey and all that stuff, which I've never seen, but I love that. Except I'm an American, and I've been sent into exile for the crime of reporting news. And so, if I am what I'd like to do, by the way, I just make a little donation to the operation today. I have a book, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, which I wrote with the help of Bobby Kennedy and the great cartoonist Ted Rall. They're here. You can. I'm not selling them. You just make a donation to the organization, or just take one and read one. And we have our weapon of mass instruction, "Steal Back Your Vote" by Greg Palast and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Again, with some great cartoonists and a couple of DVDs. Please take them. If we, we can't educate unless we learn first. Let me give you a little history. How did I get into this, right? I'm an investigative reporter. I was an investigator. I actually did nuclear plant investigations. Then suddenly I became a reporter. I'm in Britain. I'm watching black people get on the air in 2000 at the night of the Bush v. Gore election. By the next day, we're hearing reports that black people weren't able to vote. What is going on here? And I felt like maybe there's, in my conspiracy nut mind, I'm always called a conspiracy nut, which always gets a laugh from the conspirators. And in my conspiracy mind, because I used to be a conspiracy expert for the federal government, for the Justice Department. And yeah, that's what I did, nuclear plant conspiracies for the Justice Department. And I'm thinking, maybe there's a computer program that's like zooming in on black people on the voter rolls and wiping off their names. And I thought, well, that's pretty crazy, until I got the program from Catherine Harris's office. I got two discs, CD-ROMs, which we cracked. And it's a list of people who are removed from the voter rolls because they're felons. They're criminals, not allowed to vote. Okay. By the way, only a few states still have that old Jim Crow law, but okay. But that's the law. But that's the law, okay? All right, so that so these are the people who weren't allowed to vote. And for example, so I cracked the list with some experts. For example, James Brown, committed a felony, and he's matched with James Brown Jr., who lost his vote. And I'm thinking, there seems to be something wrong with that. Then I'm looking at these other names. A woman named Bobby Jean Moore lost her vote because someone named Robert Moore had been convicted of a crime. And by the way, he was convicted of his crime in 2014, so he not only changed his sex, but this list is from 2000, and he committed the crime in 2014. And so I'm thinking, wait, oh my God. Then Ms. Badpenny over here, she's going through the list, and she's saying, wait, how about who's this one here? Larry Newton, who committed his crime in 2025. So Catherine Harris and Jeb Bush were very good investigators. They could actually go into the future and pick out. But there's one other thing that I began to note about this list. Thousands of people, 56,000 people were on the list. And exactly none, not one was an illegal voter. Not one. But they all had something interesting next to their name. Not all, but mostly. I'll read you this list. This is random. BLA, 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 WHI, BLA, BLA. Is there a pattern? BLA. Okay. So this was it was an elimination of tens of thousands of black voters from the voter roll, and the presidency of the United States was determined by 537 votes because tens of thousands of African Americans lost their vote. Shift to 2004, and I thought, I'm done with this stuff. And then I get through my email box a whole bunch of letters from Karl Rove and GeorgeWBush.com. Now you're wondering, they all say confidential. Now why would Karl Rove send me his stuff? He didn't. A friend of mine set up a fake website called GeorgeWBush.org, and they accidentally shifted. Talk about voting machines. We got Karl Rove's emails, which he's not supposed to. He doesn't even say he has copies of. I do, Karl. I've got them. And they were called a bunch of emails, confidential, called caging lists. What the hell's a caging list? Once again, Ms. Bad Penny jumps on the computer and starts mapping this stuff. We start working for BBC. Oh, by the way, that story about the black felon voters, I put at the top of the nightly news, BBC television, front page of the newspaper, The Guardian. Top news all over the world. It was on page nothing in the United States of America. Nothing.
Dumb down.
Nothing. Okay? 2004, so I get these emails, and they're called caging lists. Caging lists, what are these? So we crack it, find out the voters and their addresses. And so all these voters at places like the Naval Air Station in Jacksonville, Florida. You see that? Mm-hmm. Naval Air Station. Like, why? So then we check it out. They're sending, what is caging? What's a caging list? So we go to experts in mailing, direct mail, and turn to our attorney, Bobby Kennedy, and say, what's going on here? And it turns out they were sending letters to the people on this caging list, like, for example, men at homeless shelters and African American soldiers. And do not forward, when the letters came back, they challenged their right to vote, saying that they were ghost voters, not at those addresses. So a soldier would send their ballot in from Fallujah, from Iraq, absentee ballot, and they didn't know that their vote was challenged and would never be counted. Okay? Go to Iraq, lose your vote. That was 2004. Mission accomplished. Okay? Mission accomplished. Now, we get to 2008. Again, I'm hoping things will be done. I write a cover story for The Nation. Mitt Romney's bailout billionaires. Turns out Mitt Romney made $115 million on the auto bailout. That was on the cover of The Nation, and it was about to be on the cover of several other newspapers until a call was made. What? Oh, that was 12. Sorry. Oh, wait, 8. 8. Sorry, I skipped one. I haven't read my comic book in so long that in 2008, Kennedy and I discovered something called spoiling. You just heard about the absentee ballots. The other thing about switching ballots and machines, there's something where the ballots simply, even paper ballots, don't get counted. One of the secrets of American democracy, or lack thereof, is that about 1.1 million ballots are cast. They're not flipped. They're just not counted. You put something in an optical reader and you have a little mark on it, or it's bent, or something's wrong, or you send in your absentee ballot and you sign on the outside of the envelope that you forget your middle initial, and someone challenges, you don't know it. And altogether, about 3 million ballots, about 1.5 million absentee, 1.5 million in precinct cast, are never counted. They're spoiled. Now, you don't spoil a vote because you leave it out of the fridge, okay? I want to know whose ballots are spoiled. And so I went to the statisticians at the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. They checked into several 100,000 ballots. There's in 2000, there were 189,000 ballots simply not counted in Florida. Okay? Tens of thousands in Ohio in the 2004 race. What's happening? And I said, whose ballots aren't counted? You will be shocked to learn that your chance of your ballot being disqualified, thrown in the dumpster, is 900% higher if you're African American than if you're a white voter. Okay? It's not random. Okay? That was 2008. But, again, there was a different Secretary of State in Ohio. There was a mass movement which overwhelmed it. I asked Bobby, what does Mr. Senator Obama think of this? What is your guy? And he says, well, I'll find out. I'm working with Kennedy. He calls him up. And Obama knew exactly what was going on. In fact, he'd give us details about the theft of the Hispanic vote in the Southwest. But they weren't going to do anything about it because it would just remind people that he's black. And so it was just a matter of overwhelming. They can't steal all the votes all the time. By the way, that's a lesson.
Yeah.
Okay? So if we can't win with 51%, stop whining, get 56% out there. Then we turn to 2008. 12. Okay, Ms. Badpenny's telling. 2012. And I did this story about Romney making $115 million off the auto bailout and his billionaire buddies, and no one would run it. The AP said that for the first time, the AP reporter said for the first time in history of his 30-year career, he got a call from Washington saying, you may not touch this story. The UAW brought me out to Michigan and Ohio, and they reprinted the story from the British papers and passed it out among the auto workers. And so what happened was, but while I was there, I get a call from Ms. Badpenny. You got to go to Dayton. I said, I'm not going to Dayton. She says, you're going to Dayton. I said, what's in Dayton, Ohio? He could tell you, there's nothing in Dayton. So it's like, I said, I'm done. My work is done. No one's in America has taken my story. He said, you got to go. I got information that something is happening with the early voting. Now, let me tell you about early voting. Early vote, we have in America an apartheid voting system. I think you're kind of picking that up. We call it Jim Crow, but it's apartheid, okay? And in Ohio, as Harvey will tell you, especially in Ohio, there's two different, black people and white people vote on 2 different days. White people vote on the Tuesday of election day, okay? They get time off and they're, consultants and things, they can take their own time. Black people don't get the time off on Tuesday, so they all go, and they don't all have wheels, so they go on the Sunday before for early voting. It's called Souls to the Polls Day, and they stuff the church buses on Sunday after service, and they go. So I went to a little church, the Freedom Faith Missionary Baptist Church of Dayton, Ohio, and I show up, and I said, Martin Luther King III asked me to just join you, which he did. Souls to the Polls Day, we took off, and there was a line, okay? That's the first thing. Now, in Dayton, Ohio, on Election Day, that is White Voter Day, there's 176 polling stations in Dayton, which is Montgomery County. Throughout Ohio, there was one polling station in every county, just one, on Souls to the Polls Day, when 70% of African Americans vote. One polling station, so that Cleveland had one polling station. The lines were 7 hours to vote. And in Dayton, where I was, the line was 4 to 5 hours. One single precinct in Dayton, 80,000 people voting. 80,000. And by the way, no one got out of line, that's what shocked them. That's what shocked them. No one got out of line. They sang songs. They kept warm. In a cold, the line stretched out into the freezing, remember it's winter, into the freezing parking lot. No one moved. But here's why I went to Dayton. You can see that, because at the end of the line, they didn't get a ballot. They got this, okay? Now, you have to take my word. I feel like Joe McCarthy. I've got documents here. The difference between me and McCarthy is I've got the documents, see? And so I'm showing Mimi. You trust her, right? It says application for absent voters ballot. So it's an absentee voter application. Now, this is an official federal election. They are at the polling station. There's voting booths all along the wall, hundreds of voting stations, which are all locked off. No black voters allowed to touch the voting machine. Okay? None. Instead, they're given an application for an absentee ballot. They go sit in another room. They call their number. They bring up their application. Then it's reviewed. And if they like the application, they give them an absentee ballot. They fill that out and stick it in an envelope, Since they're already there, they didn't require them to put a stamp on it. So they are mailing the absentee ballot to the guy who's standing across from them. And I said, what is this? So I called his partner, law professor Robert Fitrakis. It's now midnight. And I say, Bob, they weren't given ballots. They were given, now he's been in the game. He knows about the theft of this, right? But even his partner says, nah, they couldn't have done that. It's a federal election. They got it by law. They have to give them ballots, not like bouncy ballots, not kind of application, maybe a ballot. So I talked to the county supervisor. I said, why are you doing this? He said, well, that's the only way those ballots can be challenged.
Oh, my God.
Now, there are 500,000 black people voting in Ohio on that Sunday, subject to challenge. Remember when Karl Rove went crazy and he said, it's not over in Ohio, just talk to the Secretary of State? Because you can cast your ballot, then there's getting it counted. So I actually ran in the middle of the night at 1 a.m. The law professor, his partner, Bob Fitrakis, fantastic guy, said, I'm going to court in the morning with this. Okay. So that's a black ballot. Okay, this was 12. 12.
That's when also, so they had the oh God.
So now I'm saying, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing any more. Then she says, Lenny Bad Penny. She's like, every time I try to like move on or retire or do whatever that I'm supposed to do and get the hell out of this game, I get a note. We point this out. I'm looking at, one habit I do have is to fall asleep at night, I often go through tables of statistics. And I came across, I kid you not, I'm not making that up, I should tell you. I came across this. Here's the voter registration in Ohio of African Americans according to the calculations of the Federal Elections Commission. And there are, let's see, my eyes aren't good. What does that number say there? 12?
That's the one that's circled?
Yeah.
723.
723,000 African Americans are registered to vote in 2012. Now the population of African Americans then goes up by 14. And what's the number of
The population?
no, that's the
Total
registered.
Registered, 680.
Somehow 43,000 black people vanished. They just vanished. Okay, between 2012 and 2014. Black population goes up. Now, some people, die, move out of the state, whatever, but then other people register, right?
Down.
And so it went down by 43,000 names. Now, when you move out of the state, do you send your Secretary of State a note saying, listen, I've moved? But no, you don't. So your name should be there. So what's going on? 43,000 black people just go poof? Where'd they go? Okay, so I have trying to figure this out, and then suddenly I look up on Fox News, and there's that my political guru, Dick Morris, talking about millions of people voting twice in America. Millions of double voters. People voting in 2 different states, which is a federal crime. I go, really, 1 million double voters? I check into it. There is something called, that has been instituted, which is taking effect in 16 and 29 Republican states, called Interstate crosscheck. Kansas Interstate crosscheck. Now, what the hell is Kansas Interstate crosscheck? So I start gathering the information and start investigating. And it turns out it's a list of 7 million people who've supposedly voted twice in America. That's a hell of a conspiracy, a massive conspiracy of millions of people voting twice. I get this information, of course, every American newspaper is immediately telling me, forget it. So I go to Al Jazeera, and they say, yes, we want to investigate this story. I have to go to terrorist TV to get anything done. And, so now, of course, I call up, and I say, 7 million double voting criminal felons. That's evil. How many of you put in jail? None. Okay, can I have the list of the so-called double voting felons? It's like, these are lists of public. No, because it's a criminal investigation. We're criminally investigating 7 million people. Okay, so it's all confidential, but of course, as in the case of the caging list, there's always this little birdie who does a wonderful job for me. I love that guy. And little birdie starts showing up with the caging list. Not the caging list, with the cross-check list. The cross-check list. Okay, so here's some. Okay, so here's a guy named Mohammed, who votes in Georgia. And he supposedly voted at the same time. Another Mohammed voted at the same time, the same election in Ohio. Voted twice. It's a federal crime. So Mohammed voted again as Mohammed. Interestingly, it's Mohammed Al-Wais Mohammed, and then voted again as Mohammed Rashid Mohammed. And Mohammed Saeed Mohammed voted again as Mohammed Osman Mohammed. And Mohammed Abdi Mohammed voted as Mohammed D. Mohammed. Now, that guy gets around, this Mohammed. But here's the thing. Mohammed and Mohammed all lose their votes. All lose their votes. Okay. All lose their votes. They lose their right to vote. Now, here's what happens. About a fourth of America now mails in your ballot. You mail in your ballots. Except in the state of Oregon. If you mail in your ballot and they don't count it because it's been challenged because you're on this list, you don't know it. If your ballot is challenged because you were given a provisional ballot, right, you may tell an exit pollster how you voted, but it didn't get counted. So notice what's going on here. And Harvey has a good phrase for it, as he does. Strip and flip. So first there's the strip. So what happens we have now in America, we're still asking the question, can black people vote in America? 50 years after the Voting Rights Act. Of course, 2 years after the Voting Rights Act was thrown in the garbage by the Supreme Court. Because supposedly racism in voting has come to an end. That's the court's phrase. Right? Now, strip and flip. So what happens is we not only have apartheid voting systems, but we have kind of an apartheid vote theft with minority voters. And this is interesting. By the way, believe it or not, okay, it turns out that 96% of the people named Chung are Asian American. And they are highly vulnerable to this, to cross-check. See, the question was, how is it that matching, and what they do is their sophisticated method is matching their first name and the last name of voters. That's it. Now, how does that help you knock out minority voters, Mr. Chung, Mr. Rodriguez? Okay, because the history of slavery in America for black folk, the history of immigration of Asian Americans who vote, surprisingly, 75% Democratic, the history of Hispanic voters. This is a way to knock out people with common names, and they have other ways that even juice the list even more. So we have apartheid vote theft. So to some extent, the people on this list, the millions of voters whose votes are at risk by caging, by felon purges, by cross-check trickery, okay, they would love to have their votes flipped because they don't get to vote. That's like, they're not complaining about dessert. They're not allowed at the table. So now that's why we are talking about, we've been working together because we have to have a multifaceted, multi-front battle because they are stealing it from every direction they can. It's not about Democrats or Republicans. It's about right and wrong. And I didn't know what to do about it. I mean, other than to shout and expose. But again, from Al Jazeera, from BBC, from The Guardian, we have to do it in these meetings. We have to get the word out. Take these books, please. Support our efforts. But let me tell you, so I didn't know what to do. And then I got a call from Senator Sanders. No, Hank Sanders. Senator Hank Sanders. You can applaud Hank Sanders. He's a wonderful guy. Hank Sanders, a great African-American leader of the state Senate in Alabama. And he says, get down here, Palast. I said, I don't go to Alabama. He said, yeah, you got to get down. She's always telling me you got to go to Alabama. And so I go down to Alabama. And I said, so what's up? And the answer is, he marched with Martin Luther King 50 years ago. And from Selma to Montgomery. Okay? And by the end of that march, the Voting Rights Act had been introduced and was on the way to passage to give people the right to vote no matter what your color, right? Now, so I go down there, and he is living proof of the great advance that's been made. An African-American who represents now Selma, Alabama, in the state legislature. And I said, so am I down here for another celebration? Because they've been having endless celebrations of the Voting Rights Act. He says, screw the celebration. They took my name off the voter rolls. He says it's happening. And what I find out, crosscheck was just instituted in Alabama. Now, what do we do? I asked him. He said, well, walk over the bridge. The bridge that King walked over, he walked over. I was with Linda, and joining us, he had me walk over the bridge. I walked over with Linda Lowry, who, when she was 14, she was the front of the line. She was right near John Lewis, and the police beat the crap out of her so badly that she was put in a hearse. And then she suddenly jumped up and said, "No, I'm not dead," and ran back to the bridge to continue the march. And they both said the same thing. You have to keep marching. It's not over. And so they walked over the bridge again with me to make a point. Because when Martin Luther King Jr. was at the Brown Church in Selma, he asked, "Who will walk with me?" And everyone, hesitating for good reason. There were guns, there were horses, there were bullets. Who will walk with me? And the kids stood up first, by the way. And they walked. And on Bloody Sunday, they were beaten. And then they walked again. People don't understand. They walked day after day for months before they could get over the bridge, arrested. Linda Lowry was put in a metal box until she fainted. She was 14 years old and still had the stitches in her head from the prior beating. So I'm asking you, who will walk with me?
I will.
Yep. And
I will.
and the way, yes.
This is war.
And so the question is, how are we going to do it? How do we walk? And the answer is, there's a million things we can do. Okay? As one of the original marchers who was with us, like Linda said, she says there's a lot of bridges. We each have something we can do, a bridge we can cross. First thing is get informed, for God's sakes. I'm giving out these, my foundation's giving out these books. Second, or films, comic books, whatever, find out the information, get it across. If you haven't signed up when you walked in, please do. And I hope you don't mind if we get your names and send you messages to follow up on this, because we can't keep meeting like this. We got to do it electronically in every way we can. And then we have to take on this issue as we did before. It was white and black, right? So we can't have an apartheid voter rights movement. We have to join hands again as PDA is now working with churches, the black churches in the Southeast. We have one battle. It's one election, one democracy. I want you to walk with me, and you can do that by, I'm making now a feature film, which goes from Selma to, it's a lot of time in Ohio, a lot of time with crosscheck, a lot of time in North Carolina, where Jim Crow is risen again, except he's now Dr. James Crow, systems analyst, right? And he's purging, and he's flipping, and he's stripping and flipping. Okay? And so we have to do this together. And I'd like, if you want to make a donation, there's Miss Bad Penny right there. Could you stand up again one more time? To Mimi or to
The front,
and we're
to the front,
and-
front desk on the yard.
and I'll sign the books. If any of you want to go to our site, we're, by the way, 501c3 tax foundation. So it's tax deductible. For $1,000, you can get credited as a producer, where you can be a mini mogul, right? Because the moguls ain't going to back this. Any of the proceeds from today will be split with Harvey and my groups, because we're going to work together and helping each other out. What can you do? So there's a lot to do. We'll be informing you. In fact, Mimi gave some specific things about, and especially about, and you, by the way, protect your own vote. You think you're registered, check again. But we have to get the word out, and I need you to just walk with me today and walk with Harvey, and I know that Mimi's walking with us, and I appreciate that. I know you'll be joining me, and stay informed with me. Thank you.